Well, let's follow up on the findings from the Ontario Human Rights Commission's examination of the violent interactions between the Toronto Police Service and the city's Black community. Renu Mandhane is the Chief Commissioner of the Ontario Human Rights Commission. She joins me from Toronto. Thank you so much for taking time to talk about these important findings. I do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Can we begin by discussing where these numbers come from? Let's start there. What did you look at in this report?
So the Ontario Human Rights Commission under the Human Rights Code has powers to inquire and obtain documents and data from various sources. So this report covers information that we obtained from the Special Investigations Unit. It includes it's a complete analysis of files from 2013 to 2017.
Okay, and what we see is, well, Black people are less than 9% of Toronto's population. They are, as your report puts it, grossly overrepresented in violent interactions with the police. What does that suggest?
Well, at this point, we don't know exactly what it suggests because really we need to hear from the Toronto Police Service as to how they explain these disparities. But certainly when you read the director's reports, and we also coupled that with case law and interviews with members of the Black community, what emerges is serious concerns about racial discrimination in use of force incidents, in stops and questions, and in certain arrest situations.
When we look at the numbers, and especially the numbers involving violent interactions, it's worth repeating them here for our viewers. Black people are involved in 28.2% of police use of force cases, 36% of police shootings, 61.5% of police use of force cases resulting in civilian death, and 70% of police shootings resulting in civilian death. Does the report look at whether the actions of the police were justified in any of those cases, and is that important?
Well, so what we know is that the SIU clearance rate is about 97%. So that means that in about 97% of the cases, the SIU finds that there is no basis to lay criminal charges against the officer. But from a human rights perspective, that's not a complete answer because discrimination is not a criminal offense. And so there could very well be interactions where the SIU does not lay criminal charges, but could be discriminatory under the Human Rights Code. And so that's why our analysis of the SIU director reports isn't as focused on whether there is criminal culpability, but rather looks at trend data in terms of the disparities, but also looks at the SIU director reports, which reveal some instances where, for example, officers didn't seem to have adequate grounds to stop the individual in the first place, where there are unreasonable searches. And those are the kinds of misconduct that wouldn't be within the jurisdiction of the SIU.
Okay, so I guess what these numbers raise certainly for me, and I think a lot of people watching, is what's the value of this information now? What does it tell us about what might be happening in the city of Toronto and how we deal with it?
Well, I think first what it tells us is that the concerns of the Black community that they are overrepresented in police use of force cases resulting in serious injury and death is factual. That isn't a perception. It's not a set of anecdotes. Those are the facts. I think what it warrants is a very serious response from the police service. And the first response, and I think a very reasonable one based on the data we're producing, is for the police board to mandate that the service collect data. I think in many ways, the reactions to this story show why data is so powerful and why it has the potential to really shift our understanding of the nature of interactions between police and civilians. And, this is an interim report. We expect to do more analysis of a broader range of police and civilian interactions in our final report. And I think that'll lead us to a place where we can make some firmer conclusions about racial discrimination.
How open do you think the police services and the police services board are to that? You've mentioned that you think it's important to start collecting this kind of data. What they've said today is, at least in the statement I saw, they'll submit that idea to their anti-racism advisory panel. They do have concerns about how collecting that data could affect interactions between police and members of the community. What do you think they're worried about?
I think that's a question for them. I think that What we know is that 30 years of reports, all the way back to the Claire Lewis report in 1989, point to data collection as a foundation to understanding racial disparities and identifying discrimination. So this is something the board has been called on to do a number of times over many years. It doesn't require more study. It just requires a commitment to do it. Police forces across the United States and in the UK collect this data, and they make the data publicly accessible. And Toronto's not so unique that it can't follow that lead.
Okay. They also said today, the police services and the police services board, in a joint statement, that no organization is immune from overt and implicit bias, and the force is working to address those issues. They say they've been working for years in the community to confront these challenges, and that more work is underway. And I guess the question for most people looking at these results today is, are relations improving? Can the police force is saying, look, we're working on it and getting better at it. Does the evidence suggest that?
So our expert, Dr. Scott Wortley, looked at data from two time periods, from the early 2000s and then the more recent data from 2013 onwards. And what we see is that the rates of disparity in serious injury and death cases have remained largely constant. That doesn't mean that the police, aren't taking important initiatives related to training, et cetera, and they seem to be doing that. But I think what we know is that these disparities are relatively constant, and they require very concerted, evidence-based approaches. And, this isn't something that's likely going to just be solved through training. The police have a unique position in our society. They're empowered to use deadly force in a way that no other state agency really has the mandate to do that. And so I think it's important that they distinguish themselves from other institutions that may face racism and hold themselves to the highest standards, because failure to do so can have deadly consequences.
All right, it's a story we'll continue to follow. Renu Mandhane, the Chief Commissioner for the Ontario Human Rights Commission. Thanks for your time tonight. Appreciate it.
Bye.